Great. I see we already have some attendees. Hello, everyone joining us today. I hope you all have had a wonderful week. And we'll just give it a couple of minutes for everyone to join. Yeah, hopefully it hasn't been a too busy week. I know a lot of people are wrapping up the quarter, so it is quite a busy one. But yeah, hi, Brian. Hope you're doing well. Great, and we have a couple more attendees. Hello to all the new joiners. We're just giving it a couple minutes before we start.
Hi guys.
Okay, as we give it a little bit longer, let's see. Everyone in the chat, rate your week out of a 1 to 10. Let's see what the general consensus is. It'll be good to get some feedback, seeing how things are going. Judging by the fact that you're on this webinar, it might be that it's been a bit of a frustrating one, and hopefully we can alleviate some things today. Okay. 10, nice, M. Yeah. Good week for you then. Yeah. I think we can get going, and yeah, everyone else can catch up on the recording. So, welcome everyone. In today's webinar, we're going to be discussing inheriting a CRM chaos. So, how to optimize for success. Really, what we do find with CRMs is that it can be the perfect breeding ground for absolute chaos. And unless it's managed well and kept up to date, very easily the smallest thing can throw it out, and we understand the pain when it comes to that. You might be in a case where you've inherited your CRM, and it's been a bit messy, and you just are struggling, where to even begin, or it's just gotten to the time where you've put in so much data and it hasn't had enough governance that it just is starting to paint different pictures wherever you look. So in today's webinar, uh, both Tommy and I are going to really be talking a little bit more. So, just a bit of an introduction. My name is Blake Roberts. I will be your host for today. I am a HubSpot growth consultant here at BBD Boom, focusing really on building out and scoping HubSpot for your business to make sure that you're maximizing it and getting the most out of your CRM. And we're also joined by Tommy. So, Tommy, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Blake. Hi, everyone. My name's Tommy Price. I am a solutions architect here at Boom. I've been working with HubSpot now for just over 6 years. And in that time, I've seen so many instances of HubSpot that are somewhat chaotic. So we're hoping to alleviate some of those problems that you guys might be having today as well.
Perfect. In today's webinar, we're really going to be discussing, four main areas. Firstly, how to recognize CRM chaos. What are some immediate fixes to regain control? What you can do to optimize long-term success. And then finally, we'll have a section for Q&A. If you have any questions that you have now or throughout the webinar, feel free to pop them in the chat and we can answer them at the end. Great. So I'm going to hand it over to Tommy.
Yeah, brilliant, guys. So I think the first thing to say is before you can fix a messy CRM, you first need to recognize the chaos. The reality is many businesses suffer from this, a CRM that can feel overwhelming, cluttered data, outdated workflows, and also no clear ownership. So really, first step is recognizing that if your team doesn't think the data is right, they don't trust the data, then parts of the system are failing, and we need to review that and clean it up. Really, there are five or six common signs of CRM chaos that we see on a day-to-day basis. The first one involves duplicates and outdated data. This is a classic scenario, a common scenario whereby duplicate contacts or companies can cause sales teams to chase the same lead twice. This can become a nightmare. Another notable point as well is an over-engineered setup. So maybe you have automations running in the background that nobody knows what they actually do, and it's causing some level of chaos in the background. Key staff members leaving the business. So maybe the person that set up HubSpot or your CRM initially is no longer with the business, which means no one has a clear view of any process documentation. And that in turn can cause chaos as well. Especially when it comes to no clear governance. If there's no clear ownership of the CRM, multiple users can basically go rogue and create their own processes, and no one's singing from the same hymn sheet. All of this in reality leads to inaccurate reporting, especially from marketing, sales, and customer service. If the data that you're inputting into the CRM and the processes aren't right, the output, which is the reports, become inaccurate and you effectively can't trust them. But I suppose if any of these points resonate with you guys, you're not alone with this. The reality is many businesses inherit some form of CRM chaos over time. Now let's take a look at a real world scenario of how one company we've worked with has transformed its CRM over time. I think first of all, let's look at the challenges. So there were a number of problems with this customer in the way that they were using HubSpot. They were using HubSpot for a number of years and it had been running over time. And in that time, it had grown into its own beast. But some of the notable problems included duplicate contacts or outdated contacts, and upwards of 100,000 of those. So, part of the solution with that scenario is first running an audit so we can identify the key issues and looking into things like hard bounces, contacts that don't have an email address, and we cannot, in fact, contact them at all. And what we can do with that in terms of the impact is making sure that we're cleaning that contact or company database down to the active ones over time, especially when it comes to the GDPR tools as well within HubSpot. This customer over time had grown a lot of subscription types, and this meant that the opt-ins were inaccurate. So assessing as part of the solution how people are opting in to relevant marketing subscription types through the means of forms over time, and also relooking at the consent messaging really helped with that approach. As far as the overall organization of the CRM, they had over 500 unorganized lists where team members have basically been going rogue and creating their own lists over time. And this can cause a lot of confusion when it comes to marketing segmentation. So part of that solution was being able to consolidate those lists down, delete out the old ones, and organize them in structured segments and folders within HubSpot so that you have the evergreen lists that you can use over time for any of your marketing campaigns. Notably as well, when it comes to automation, we see it a lot, especially for this customer here, having outdated or broken workflows. You can get into the scenario where HubSpot has hundreds of automations running in the background and no one actually knows what they're doing over time. So as part of this, doing a workflow audit, turning off any of the old workflows, building out the new ones, and implementing things like lead scoring. So they've got a clear marketing to sales handoff. And that really resulted in much faster and more accurate handoff processes for HubSpot. In this case, this customer was using the Salesforce integration to push leads from HubSpot to Salesforce. We see this not only with Salesforce, but with a lot of integrations where if they're not managed over time, a lot of sync issues can arise. And as part of this, we reviewed the field mappings, fixed any errors just to make sure the overall functionality of those integrations is working to then be able to trust the reporting over time.
Mm. Tommy, I've found quite often what's happened is, you know, people implement HubSpot or any CRM, but they implement HubSpot and they get quite used to it. And HubSpot in itself is, a really easy tool to use where you get quite familiar with everything. But what happens? They go, I just need a report for this, or I just need a list for this, or I just need that. And over time, what happens is they start to add to it and they don't ever think, they think, okay, I've used it now, and we just forget about it and it sits there. And one common thing I've noticed is especially when it comes to lists. A lot of people will create a static list because they want some type of snapshot at the moment of, maybe their contacts or companies who meet that certain criteria. But what they don't realize is that with things like static lists, it's going to give that snapshot of that moment in time, but even a day later, 6 months later, it's going to become a bit out of date. And then what happens from there is, they start trying to fix things and they start to do things, and then it starts to cause a bit of a spiral when it comes to that. So I know from my side, especially, a lot of these situations that you've faced are very common, and it's not intentional. But I think also one of the biggest things is really people, you will have an advocate for a CRM system who will go in and say, great, we will build, like, I'll take on this project for the company, I'll build it, I'll do everything. And then maybe they potentially leave or change departments or something happens and it's often given to someone else. And then, you start looking at the data with fresh eyes and you go, hold up, this isn't matching that. And all of a sudden, you start to notice that there's a lot more complexities in it. And so, really, what I want to, talk about is it's just like that. It's the smallest things that, you can do to change to bring your CRM back under control. And start there. So what I want to do is just really run through some immediate fixes to regain that control. And the first one, and this is a pretty standard one across everything, is you first have to do an audit and a data health check. The problem is you're not going to know what is wrong without analyzing your data and your HubSpot portal. Really, what you would need to do is you look in the data quality command center if you have Ops Hub Pro or beyond. Look at your duplicate management, compare how many duplicates do you have of contacts, how many duplicates of companies. Is there a way that you can work those down, merge them together? Often what happens with imports is sometimes you'll give control to, let's say the sales team or marketing team, and they will do a data import of contacts, but they will leave out a unique identifier such as an email address or company domain. Now, what happens with that is HubSpot will know, hey, hold up, this person's name and this person's name and all their information is exactly the same, but they have different emails. So we're pretty sure you mean the same thing, but we're not going to create the same record in case you wanted two separate ones. And it's just simple things like that that you need to uncover. So really running that HubSpot audit, looking at all of that and taking a look at your properties. Often what happens is we create properties on all the different objects for, specific use cases. And then over time, instead of updating that property with new information, the team will just go ahead and create a new one. And over time, what happens is data is stored on the older properties and not moved over. So now you're asking one question, but all of a sudden it's, in 4 or 5 different properties and not consolidated, allowing you to lose a bit of data. The next step, oh, well, before I jump onto it, one thing that we do offer, and I would really encourage you to do this, is we offer a free data cleansing checklist. This will give you a list that you can go line by line to make sure that you, have got all your data in check. So it will give you best practices on how to deduplicate your contacts and companies, how to standardize your data, how to validate your data, data that's inactive, potentially old, how to clean it up in the most effective manner, and so many more tips. So, what I would encourage after this webinar, we are going to pop you an email with a couple of these links should you be interested. However, if you are desperately looking for this, pop your name and just say me in the chat and I'll make sure to note of it and we can send it to you straight after this webinar so that you can just start actioning it. Great. What is, there we go. Okay, so that is, let me just get this to hide. Let's just jump back into it. And great. Betsy, Alex, Kasha, and Lenoy and Brian, I will send it all to you immediately after this. What I want to do is I'm just going to re-jump into my slideshow. There we go. Lisa as well, we'll send it to you as well. It's a really great, it just allows you to organize your mind and to know what you need to do in a prioritized order, which is always good. Perfect. Next step, what you really want to do is start cleaning your data and fixing your processes. Now, this is often one of the hardest areas because it sounds daunting. You go, yeah, great, I know my data's out of whack and I know that my processes are, but where do I even begin? Well, simply the first thing you have to do is do your duplicates and outdated records because what is happening there is it's either overinflating your numbers or you're reporting on data that no longer is relevant. So starting with those two is really important. Next, what you would want to do is map out your key processes to optimize with the user journey mapping. Now, what that is really is taking a look at your key processes. Let's say data coming into HubSpot and how it, gets passed over to the sales team. Pull out a tool. You could do it in PowerPoint. You could do it in, a flow chart or any tool of your liking. You could do it on a piece of paper, and map out what should happen with your data as you reach each step. So, as an example, where is your data coming from? Are you running Google Ads at the moment? Is it coming through a Facebook ad, a Facebook post? Are your sales team importing data from, events that they're maintaining? Map all of those out so that you understand how data can come into your CRM. And then from there, what you would want to do is at each stage, what is required to happen to ensure that the contact or company or data is moved to the next department effectively. And then lastly, what you would want to do is just check your existing integrations. As Tommy mentioned in the use case, we often see this with integrations into other platforms like Salesforce or Dynamics or any of those, where there is a possible connection within that integration that either needs to be updated, it's maybe pushing information to the wrong property, or at the same time it's become a bit outdated and just not working. So we would recommend all the native integrations will give you sort of a list of areas to work on. So either look at fixing those, or if you're no longer needing it, let's say for example you were using Salesforce and the team has now moved into HubSpot itself and Sales Hub, then we would recommend removing the integration because we don't want data to be pushed somewhere and pulled if it's no longer needed, because that just adds to the complexity of data potentially getting messy. The third step is you want to go ahead and implement the quick fixes and optimizations. So again, you don't have to start with everything at once. It's really about starting small, making sure you've ticked off that box and then moving on to the next step. Some of the quick wins we recommend: firstly, fix your lead routing. See how when a lead comes through, how it routes through the business, and make sure that is accurate. Because the problem is if your data is coming in inaccurately and then you're passing it off to, let's say, the sales team inaccurately, then they, might get a bit annoyed and they might not be able to do their job, and it leads for a bit of friction. So we want to make sure that lead routing and how it's passed, from maybe marketing to sales and so on, or to customer success is fixed. We also want to take a look at dashboards. Now, dashboards is the central place to look at your reporting. And so we really want to make sure that your reports are accurate, your dashboards are up to date, they're reporting on the right time frame, the right metrics, and all of that, so that you can also continue to uncover discrepancies. Because if you have a report telling you, hey, hold up, you had, 2,000 extra contacts come in last month, but you're not seeing that pass through to sales, it's a quick area to see, what needs to be fixed and how. And then lastly, to take a look at your workflows. This is a really good quick fix. As Tommy mentioned, what happens is you build a workflow for a particular cause, you build another one and you build another one, but you forgot about the one you built 6 months ago. And so all of a sudden you have, a trigger that is firing off to do something, and another workflow fires that makes it do something else. And all of a sudden your data will become very inaccurate. So taking a look at that, reviewing them, I personally suggest putting, your workflows into folders, getting into a good habit of that, and also having a good naming convention. Also, utilizing HubSpot's AI to also give a description. That's also a really powerful tool because we also got to think with this data cleanup, we might be the ones doing it, but we want to make sure that the team that grows and potentially uses HubSpot, should they require, to get into a workflow and know what it is, they can look at the description and easily get an overview of what it is meant to achieve so that they can choose to amend it as need be. And longer term, really what you want to do is look at building out a CRM roadmap and building out a phased by phased approach. And for this, what I'm going to do is pass it back to Tommy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're optimizing a CRM for longer term success, just keep in the back of your mind that it's probably taken you months to years to get into the chaos that you're currently suffering. So don't expect to have everything fixed and working overnight. And that's where we can really separate those quick wins from the longer term strategic goals. But ultimately, once you've tackled those quick wins and regained some level of control, the next step would be building a CRM that works for you in the long term. And there's a number of ways we can do this through the governance of the system and also incorporating new automations in HubSpot. When it comes to the governance of HubSpot, assigning the clear CRM ownership and responsibilities is a very important point. I think every CRM needs to have a gatekeeper, whether that's one person within the business, depending on your organization size, or a cross department team. Quite often we see there are far too many super admins inside of HubSpot. So we really want to limit those super admin accesses down. Too many admins within the system can lead to confusion. People can go ahead and create new automations, workflows, and maybe the teams aren't speaking to each other. So we really want to limit that down to a small set of users for ownership. Also with HubSpot now, we've got permission sets. So each team should only really have the permissions granted that are necessary for their role. So really creating different permission sets over time to help streamline the access into the system, and assign clear roles to who is able to set the tools up. On that note as well, we've got clear naming conventions and documentation. I think as your CRM evolves over time, we need to ensure that you're using a clear folder structure and naming conventions for each of the tools and assets that you're setting up. For example, being in a marketing team, making sure you're having clear naming conventions for your campaigns, from a reporting perspective, is quite critical. And not only that, if the marketing team are creating campaigns over time, making sure the assets that they're linking to that campaign are accurate as well, because that will then lead into the downstream reporting. Finally, what I would also recommend is just having regular CRM audits to prevent that future chaos. Think of your CRM as a living system. It's evolving over time, so it's not a one and done approach. Once you've done your first audit and it's working to some extent, you still need to iterate that over time, and we normally recommend monthly to quarterly audits to help fix and identify those issues. When you get to this stage as well, leveraging the automation and AI features that HubSpot now has, a big one that's come about recently is the Breeze Intelligence feature, which allows you to enrich your contact and company data over time. So this will help further automate the quality of your data within HubSpot without any human or manual effort involved there. Blake mentioned this earlier as well. With the Operations Hub, we also have the Data Quality Center, which helps you monitor and fix any formatting issues within your data. Again, removing some of that day-to-day manual work the team needs to take out. One of the big ones about this is also workflow automation. And when we're talking about workflows in HubSpot, this ultimately means less manual work over time. When you first start using your CRM, it's quite common to not have many automations set up, but as the CRM grows and your team grows, you can then find out specific areas within the system that can be further automated to help reduce that manual effort over time. And I think from a marketing perspective, at least, that's introducing those features like lead nurturing, email workflows and follow-up emails that can be sent out automatically over time. Especially from a sales perspective, making sure the team are utilizing the sequences function, so sending out those one-to-one sequences automatically at specific stages of the sales process. even down to automatically assigning leads to salespeople based on their regions, specific locations, and HubSpot have task reminders, so making sure the team are automatically notified when specific tasks need to take place in order to get that deal closed.
Perfect.
And then really as a final step, it's looking at the user adoption and training of the system. So a well-structured CRM is only effective if the team are using it correctly and accurately in the right way. We need to make sure all of the teams are following the same processes. So there are some best practices from an adoption perspective. What we would recommend is just making sure each of the teams within HubSpot are trained on the CRM. And that training is something that will need to take place not only at the start, but will need to be regularly done over time as well, especially where HubSpot release new features and potentially new processes within your business are rolled out over time. Having constant training there just means that everyone is following those same processes, and that will then lead into your reporting becoming more accurate from the system. You can then trust HubSpot with the data that it's providing. Within HubSpot as well, we've got self-serve documentation. So always pay attention to the product updates. And also the knowledge base is really in depth. It's a free resource out there, guys, for any of the teams to look into specific functionality of HubSpot, any new tools that are coming out, and refer back to the how-to guides. And then the HubSpot Academy has some free self-serve resources as well, which can be taken at any time at your own leisure, which is also a really great self-serve element of training there. But I think just as a final thought on this slide, with the right training, your CRM can go from a very chaotic system to a system that is then helping your business growth over time.
Great. Thanks, Tommy. What I'm going to do now is just open up the floor. Does anyone have any immediate Q&A or questions that they would like to ask? If you do, just feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll just give this a couple minutes so you can type it out. And yeah, we can answer it from there. One thing that I find, Tommy, while we give them a second to just write out their answers, is what you mentioned was I find, access levels within HubSpot is so important. Often when I'm taking a look at a portal for the first time, I notice that the main thing to do is everyone has super admin access. And I completely understand why. It gives you access to everything. It makes it, trying to choose permissions and all of that, it gets a bit daunting, especially if you're newer to HubSpot, because you're like, what does this actually mean or what does it do and all of that. And, they just go, oh, let's just give them super admin. They can have access to everything and it's all good. But as the team grows and more super admins get added, the problem is that you're right. People have the ability to pretty much do anything in your HubSpot. And so if, the from a potentially intern all the way up to CEO has access to make changes and to a level of a super admin, it really could just go a bit haywire quite quickly. And one thing that I know, especially from an audit perspective that we do, having more than, and just correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's 5, but the general is 3 super admins in your account is recommended, especially from a security perspective. I think that's what a lot of people forget in just general, hubs managing a CRM is if everyone has the ability to essentially delete an account, and it just adds more of a security risk to that. Whereas if you limit that ability to only a select amount of people, then really it's a lot safer. I mean, we do have things like 2FA now, but you do want to make sure that at all times your account is safe.
Yeah, and I think to that point as well, it can be a fairly painful or laborious exercise to sit down and really review those permission sets. But
Mm,
once you've done it the first time and created those permission sets, should anyone leave the business or new people join the business, you can automatically apply those roles when their user is added to HubSpot.
perfect. Just give me 1 second to open up the Q&A. There we go. Okay, so let's start at the top. Martin, what are the most common signs that a CRM is actively harming marketing and sales performance beyond just cluttered data? All right. I'm gonna answer that first. So some of the I'm gonna answer it as in I'm just having a reread this quickly. Common signs that a CRM is actively harming marketing and sales performance. And I'm going to assume there that with it's more of a chaotic CRM, let's call it that. Ideally, if your CRM is set up perfectly, it won't be harming marketing sales. It will obviously be benefiting it. Now, the biggest thing is if your data is incorrect and you depending on how you've set up your CRM, but you might be from a marketing perspective targeting the right people. So the wrong people, sorry. So let's say for example you have a set of products and you know that users within a certain industry have need product A. What you've been doing is you've added them as marketing contacts and you've been sending them emails and you've been getting in contact with them and you're doing all of that. And they're not engaging. And the reason being is they're in the wrong industry. And that's just a small bit of data that's a problem. But the biggest thing is also if you're looking at your marketing contact status, let's say you have a limit of 10,000 and you have 1,000 duplicates, that means that you're paying effectively for 1,000 extra marketing contacts that aren't needed because it's a duplicate of another record. And so that's another area, it's just from a revenue perspective, where things can be a bit smarter. But at the same time, if you have, a bit of data that is wrong, and let's say you're using HubSpot to integrate to a ad network like LinkedIn to market to them, and you're spending money there and it's not coming through. But as that goes through and it gets passed through to sales, sales can very easily, they might have a pre-qualification metric where they'll review the record before they go ahead and get in contact. And they could say, you know what, this doesn't really fit our criteria. I'm going to disqualify it. Where actually it could have been a perfect, opportunity, but just because of a bit of bad governance or a bit of a messy portal, it didn't even get through the firing line. Or, your lead scoring or something hasn't been set up correctly, or it's firing off incorrectly and it's saying, this contact's not a right fit, it's not good. And they go, okay, great, just move it off, unqualify it, where actually it did meet all the criteria, just your portal hadn't been kept up to date in terms of that. So my biggest thing is it might start small, but it will start to hurt revenue. And then your reporting gets thrown off as well, because you could very easily be getting, more numbers or less numbers, but most likely less. And you're saying, great, we've had 1,000 contacts come in and all of that, but actually it was only 500. So your reporting metrics are slightly skewed. KPIs, all of that kind of stuff as well can really be impacted by it in terms of that. I'm not sure if Tommy, if you have any other, examples or common signs that a CRM is actively harming or messy CRM is actively harming marketing or sales.
Yeah, I think it also relates into the second question though, which is how do you ensure your sales teams enter data correctly?
Mm,
Oftentimes, especially when you're a user of HubSpot, no one likes entering data into the system. It is effectively admin work, but there are some things that we can do to help streamline that inside of HubSpot. And just taking it back to mapping out your overall process flow and taking a piece of data from entry all the way through marketing and sales, making sure we've set out the required fields in HubSpot so the team physically cannot create something or move something along in the process without filling in the information. And also helping to try and standardize what the field is as well. Very common example in the sales process is if deals are being moved to the loss stage, we need to ensure there is potentially a closed loss reason there, but standardizing those options in a drop down so the sales team don't have to manually fill in the reasons each time. And we can
yeah.
enforce those fields at each stage within the pipeline as well.
I think that's a key one there is having those required fields at each stage to say once it's moved over to, let's say, quote sent, these five pieces or properties are required to be filled in before you can move the deal over, which means at least at a minimum, you are ensuring that the team is inputting the data into HubSpot and then at the same time has an opportunity to review what they've put in before moving on down the line. Okay, next one is just some common automation pitfalls that businesses fall into when trying to fix CRM efficiencies. Good question. Look, some common automation pitfalls that I've seen personally is they try to do everything automated without doing the manual work of reviewing the data first and seeing what's wrong. And they go, great, okay, let's use an example. This property is outdated. Use a workflow to just update it in bulk and maybe make this change. And then what happens is you're just moving a mess from one area to the other without actually understanding what the common problem is. And it very well might be that, yes, this could be potentially a bit chaotic and you're reporting incorrectly, but how did it get to that stage? All right, well, if we take it a few steps back, we actually see that the way that the contact, for example, was put into HubSpot has a few properties on the form that is incorrect. And that's where you actually need to focus your area so that any future information is correct, as well as, changing up your information.
What I would also say on that note is the fact that sometimes people try and automate too much at the very start of their CRM journey. In some cases it can be useful to keep the processes manual whilst the team are getting used to the system and following that structure. And then over time, it will become apparent what automations you need to put in place so that you're not just building these workflows in HubSpot for the sake of it.
Exactly. If I just get onto Angela's question a second quickly. So, with so many different functions or business units potentially using HubSpot, are there any recommendations on how to structure CRM ownership? Definitely. I think, look, especially with things like business units where you might have multiple companies within, a bigger parent company. What I personally like to recommend is that you will have your main, let's call it champion within each industry or within each business unit who could potentially be a super admin or, at that size, potentially having, a select group of people who are in charge of overall maintenance, but you just look at amending a user's permissions within that business unit so they can mostly do everything. But the bigger things like, let's say, deleting the account, you restrict so that only, the people within the wider business are able to, have that kind of level of accessibility.
And also, I think just to add to that, depending on how many business units you have in HubSpot, and how you want your teams to access the data across those business units, you can also set the permissions so that users are only able to see the data that their team owns, i.e., the data within their business unit, and not to go into other business units and start overwriting information. So you can divide the system in that way based on the team structures that you set up.
Mm. All right. I do know we're a bit over time, so I'm going to answer these last two quickly. What's the best approach to merging and reconciling multiple sources of customer data, website, lead, forms, etc., whilst maintaining accuracy? Look, if you're looking to merge data, especially duplicate data, the easiest way, in my opinion, is if you have Operations Hub Pro, you can do it automatically based on the criteria and you can bulk merge. That is one of the easiest ways if you have set criteria in terms of records and what to look for. So, are you looking for the most up-to-date record? Are you looking to potentially take emails, business emails over personal emails, chop and change that data? If you have set structure and criteria, Operations Hub Pro is fantastic for that. It does make life a lot easier. However, if you don't have it, really what you do want to just look at is um, yeah, I'm just, you know, it's going to be a bit more of a manual process, but having set criteria again. So if you can identify business emails over personal emails, recent activity over, longer term activity, all of that kind of stuff, it does make merging information a lot easier.
Yeah, I think with that as well, Blake, it's also to do with the fact that when you merge a record in HubSpot, oftentimes the information isn't lost. We're not deleting anything. We're just consolidating the activities into one record view. Um, with, and then in that case, it's also useful to determine which is the primary. So what record is it the most recent? Is it the first created that we need to take as the source of truth when we're
Mm,
merging those records?
exactly. And then the last question here, how do you prioritize fixing issues when dealing with both outdated data and broken automations? Tommy, any ideas on that one?
Yeah, very good question there. What I would say is um, initially you probably want to review the automations and turn off anything that could be impacting data, because the worst thing and the last thing you want to happen is to go through a full data cleanup and then suddenly a week later, a couple of days later, the workflows are then changing the records over time. So I think identify first those workflows of any potential issues or errors, switch them off temporarily, and then you can go forward and review the outdated data. So I would first start with looking at contacts that don't have an email address. If so, why don't they have an email address? Do we need to keep them in HubSpot because we can't email to them anyway? Has
Mm.
there been anyone that's unsubscribed from all communication? And are they still a marketing contact? Are they taking up our marketing contact limit? Do we really need to pay for them? And then finally, the hard bounces as well. If their email is hard bounce, there's a good chance that maybe they've moved on to another company. Their email is no longer contactable. So setting those types of records as non-marketing.
Yeah, exactly. And I did purposely miss out one of the questions, but that was because you asked if there is an easy and efficient way to do a HubSpot audit, and that's quick and can identify things for you. Look, from our perspective, we do offer a free audit, which can pinpoint the opportunities you need to optimize your setup and streamline your processes. So if this is something that, whether or not you think your portal is in a mess or you suspect that there is room for improvement, whether it just be within the platform, your reporting, or anything like that, let us know if you would be interested in a free audit. We'd be happy to do one for you and really just see how your portal is, being compared, in terms of are certain tools being utilized? If yes, can they be better? Yes, how? Great. And if no, what you can do to get started with them. So really an in-depth sort of audits that can help you streamline your portal and get the most out of it. So if that's something that you're interested with, you can just either pop me an email, or after this call, we'll send out this recording as well as the links to this, and you can just look to set up that HubSpot audit, and we can go in depth in terms of looking at that as and ways to improve. But that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you, everyone who's joined us. I hope that you were able to get some valuable information out of it. And if there is, yeah, Lisa, I will definitely reach out to you. But yeah, have a lovely rest of your week. Good luck with optimizing your portal. If you guys need any help, feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.